Hello and welcome. My name is Jeff Pelton, and today I would like to give you a demonstration of some live coding to demonstrate a COVID-19 stats bot posting daily stats to Mastodon. It's like a Twitter clone. And before I start, I just want to apologize for the webcam quality. This is just temporary. My desktop doesn't have a webcam yet. It's in the mail. This one is kind of from a VR headset that is fisheye, not great quality. So I'm just going to say hello and flip that off and get straight into the project today. So I've kind of outlined what I want to accomplish and show you here. We're going to start with automating toots, which are like tweets for Mastodon. And then we're going to bootstrap a node.js project. Fetch the COVID stats from an API, and then hopefully we can render a pie chart from that stats, and then get to deploying the application to GitLab with a scheduled process using their CI/CD functionality. And if everything goes well, we'll have an automated message toot that goes out once a day with the latest stats. So let's dive right in. To start, we're going to look at my quick toot application that I put together for a friend as a node.js script that can toot out a message and an image. So I've already gone ahead and git cloned this package. There's the code. It's over here. So we can see it's really simple. A couple functions to toot and toot the media. And I just want to go ahead and test this out to see if it works. I'm going to run node index. It tooted. I'm going to tab open over to my Mastodon account that I just created on mastodon.cloud under @JeffPelton, and we can see 10 seconds ago we tooted our message with an image. Pretty simple, should be enough to use for our purposes. So let's see. Next we're going to bootstrap our application. So I've created a folder here called COVID-19 stats. It has this README file that just is an outline of what we are going to accomplish. Next, I'm going to create a index.js file. In that file, just going to copy paste all of the this toot example. Get rid of a couple things. So we're going to require the Mastodon API. We're going to create a new instance of that object called M. We're going to pass it the access token, the API URL, and we have these two methods, functions that toot and toot the media, which I guess we do need the fs function here to get the file. Oops. Actually, I might change the details of that later. And for the access token, we're going to, instead of pulling them from the config file, we're going to pull those from an environment variable. So we're going to call this one Mastodon access token. And for the API URL, we're going to call that Mastodon API URL so that we can keep these a secret. The API URL is not really a secret, but the access token gives you access to your account. So that should be kept as sensitive. And then for what we want to do with this, let's go ahead and test this out again. Let's try doing just a message here. Toot test. And now from our terminal or command line in our project folder, we're just going to run node index. And that's going to fail because we haven't included the module yet. So actually the next step is we're going to create a npm package. So let's go ahead and do npm init. Let's call the package COVID stats. All these defaults are fine. And what that did was create a package.json, which you can see here. And most importantly, with our package, we want to start installing and saving dependencies like Mastodon API. Let's go ahead and do that. So we have that included. And then in another window, let's see. So then to create the token for our Mastodon account, when you're logged in, you could equally do this with Twitter, by the way. It's just Mastodon is kind of an open source federated, easy to play with, similar social network. So we're going to come over to our preferences, down to development, click new application, create a test app. All the permissions are fine. Click submit, created it. Now we click on the application name, and then we want this access token. So we're going to copy this and paste it over into our terminal. Oops, let me see if I can copy this. Like so. Export that variable name. Go. Oops. See what did I do wrong? Maybe I have to put this in quotes. $. There we go. All right. So now we've got that variable exported. Let's also export the API URL. And that is this URL /API/v1 /. I think that will do for that. So now if we run node index again, we tooted. Let's come over to our toots, and there it is. All right, great. So now we have a basic application that can toot. Next, let's see. We're going to start fetching the COVID stats. So the kind of idea for this application was when I saw this API, which makes it really easy to get the latest stats. Here's an example of it. You can check out their docs. It's a RESTful API. It's really easy to just do gets. We're going to start by just fetching, let's see, I think this is what we want here, which is a different URL than I was using. So here's the global numbers I was using. So let's look at this formatted. So here's how the response data looks. So for whenever we pull the data, it's going to give us the total number active. What we're interested in mainly is the active, the cases, and the deaths, and recovered, I think, are kind of the most interesting figures. It also has a timestamp and Unix epoch there. So yeah, we're just gonna grab this data and create a toot with these numbers in it. So let's go ahead and start doing that. Let's copy this URL. Also, we can get US numbers, the stats for other countries. We'll just start with global for now and go from there. So let's jump over to our function. I'm going to collapse some of the stuff we're not using yet. Create a new function called fetch stats. I'm going to create a constant, make the font a little bigger here, for the API URL that we want to get. And in order to fetch this, we're going to use a library called request. So let me search for that real quick. I think this might be an older package as deprecated, but it's kind of a go-to, pretty easy. So we're just going to use this for the time being. So this just has an example of how to use it. So to require it, we're going to do that. And we're going to include it in our Npm package. So to do that, we're going to do Npm Install save request. That will take care of that. Now, to actually do the fetching of our data, first off, this is going to be an asynchronous call. So to handle that, we're going to have a promise. The function is going to return a promise, and we'll resolve and potentially reject that. And the first thing we're going to do is request.get the API URL, and that's going to return a callback. Let's see, going to return a callback like this. Let's go ahead and just do that actually. Okay. So this is going to request the URL. It's going to give us an error if there is one. Status response code of the request, which will hopefully be a 200, and then the body of the page. Now we want this to be JSON, so what we're gonna do is actually try to let JSON data equal JSON.parse the body. And we'll log that out, see what happens there. And now, instead of doing this toot for now, let's go ahead and just test our fetch stats. And that's going to return a promise, so it'll do a then. And when it's done, we'll go ahead and terminate the node process as well. Okay, so I'm kind of doing both semicolons and not. So let's go ahead and run this. Node index, see what happens. All right, so there's the body in plain text. And then here it is in formatted JSON. So there's all the numbers that we saw in the browser through our node process. So we can go ahead now and figure out how we want to use those numbers for toot. So let's imagine instead of saying done, oh, and actually we didn't get our done message over here. And that's because we forgot to resolve. So let's resolve this. As so. Maybe if error, let's see, error came out null. So if there's an error, let's reject, which will fail it. If there's not an error, we can go ahead and resolve. So on a resolve, let's say done. Instead of being done, let's go ahead and toot our message. And that'll return a callback, a promise. And so we'll fetch the stats. That'll return, let's say, stats. So let's just return that JSON data, the fetch stats, and then with those stats, we can create a toot message. We will toot that message. It'll return the actual toot from the API, which is known as T here. We'll print done and exit the process. So let's create a method function to get a message from the stats. So it'll take in stats, message, return message, and for now, let's just put in message equals, let's say stats dot, let's do cases. Yeah, cases total. So make that clear right there. We'll put cases. Okay. So let's go ahead and test this out. And we got an error, stats is not defined on line 72. Whoops, typo. Oops. Plural, okay. So tooted, and it's done. So let's go ahead and take a look at our Mastodon. And there it is. 7,086,008 cases. So that works great. And you can see it shows that it came from our test app. Okay, let's come back. Let's go ahead and flesh out the message. So it's a little bit nicer. I think we should start by saying where this is from. So let's say world. Let's say actually coronavirus, COVID-19, current stats for, let's try to put today's date for today, and then do a couple of new line returns. For today, we can get that with the new date, and do toDate string to just quickly get a timestamp in here. And then from there, let's go ahead and label this as for the world. We get a UTF globe in here. Make it a little more fun. Put a line return. And then let's see what would be interesting here. I think cases, deaths, and recovered are the common numbers I think people are looking at. So let's go ahead and say we have cases. Let's append to our string here. So we have the number of cases. Let's see, cases colon. And do a line return at the end. And then you see how the number came out a little bit hard to read when it's in the millions. So let's try to put some commas in there. And to do that, we can do .to locale string. That'll do local formatting. In my case, that's a comma separator for the thousands. So let's do that. And then I think we can just repeat this for deaths and recovered. And if we look at our data source here, that's just deaths and recovered. I think active, we'll demonstrate a little bit later with the, actually let's just try active too for now. See how that looks. And I think we're good. So I did this a little bit differently before. If you start adding other locations, you know, you can make this look however you want. But let's go ahead and just try running this again. Node index, tuted, done. Hop over to our Mastodon, and there we are. Coronavirus, COVID-19, current stats for Monday. This might be a little bit off. Let me see. It's not quite Monday yet. I think my server is on UTC time, which is fine for now, because I probably won't be tuning until 8 a.m. or a few hours into the day. So we've at least got today's date for the world. Here's the cases. We have comma separators, deaths, recovered, active. And I think active is recovered plus deaths, if I recall. 8, 9, something like that. We'll check it out a little bit later. Cool. So that was pretty easy. Let's keep moving along to do a few more things with this. So we've already accomplished everything under number 3 here. Got the stats. We can come back and get the United States numbers later if we want, or your location. Did some quick formatting, adding commas and whatnot. Now for the fun part, let's see if we can't render this data into a pie chart. I think that showing the comparison, because we're tuning it every day, might be interesting to see the active cases decreasing. So let's take a quick look at that. I think just want to verify my number for active. Okay, yeah, we'll just pull those straight from recovered plus deaths plus active should equal total. Deaths. Deaths plus recovered plus active. Okay, that's right. Yeah, I believe if you add these three together, you get the total number of cases. So what I think would be interesting is to show these three slices these three numbers as slices of a pie chart, because the amount of recovered cases should eventually consume most of the pie, where the number of active cases originally were almost all of the pie and will be shrinking. So it's kind of an optimistic way to watch this progress. So let's go ahead and see how we can do that. And this is kind of a fun part of the demonstration here, to see how you can pragmatically render a chart using D3 into a canvas and then tweet or toot it out automatically. So doing kind of a dynamic render on the server and tooting it is pretty fun. A lot of different applications that you can come up with, and maybe some following tasks that we can do, like creating a line chart or bar chart. I might do some follow-up videos showing Bitcoin or Ethereum projects, using the prices of those to create some dynamic things. I've also seen or thought of other creative projects where you can take inputs from a toot or a tweet and reply to them with a chart or an image that you create on the fly. There's a fun one I did creating game replays. Imagine like a chess game replay that you might render into a GIF really quick and then reply to a message about it. So anyways, different cool fun things you can do with it. Let's try it out here real quick. So these are the two links that I found to help me with this. The libraries we're going to use are D3 and Canvas. So here's an example of a pie chart, and the code, mainly the configuration and the format of the data that it needs to be in order to draw it. So I think I used this to figure out how to color it and customize and change the font. Let's go ahead and look at the code to get this server side. So there's something called D3 node that we can use on the server to draw our chart. So looking at this example, they create the D3 node, include D3, canvas, initialize it, create the size of the canvas, create the context in 2D, set up the size, the colors they want to use, create the arc, attach the context, set up the label, create the pie chart itself, attach the values, where it draws the value, the number from, do some scaling, parsing the data itself, the data source. This is the kind of how to get the data out of the source. The function to create the arcs, drawing the paths, styling it, coloring it, choosing the font style and color, and then I think drawing each of the labels, and then doing the output. So I'm going to kind of copy this from another example that I have, but this is a walkthrough of generally what we're going to do. So let's come back to our script. Let's go ahead and close the quick toot. Done with that. So to start, let's create a function called draw pie chart, I think is a good name for it. Render pie maybe. And this is going to take in some data. It's going to have our 3 slices. And again, we're going to want this to be asynchronous. So it's going to all be wrapped in a promise. So let's go ahead and call this toot. We're going to create a toot media image from the render py. We're going to pass it stats. No, actually, I think we're going to pass it an object. And that's going to look like 3. Actually, it's going to be an array with our pie slices. And they're going to be they're going to be objects with a name, like active, and a value with the stats value. So we're going to have 3 of these. We're going to have deaths and recovered. So we've got our recovered value, our deaths value. Okay. So we're going to pass that along, and then we're going to pass that into our toot function, which will toot the image as well. So that's the goal of that method function. So we've got render py up here that we need to create now. The first thing we should probably do is include the npm modules that we're going to need. So to do that, we're going to come over to our command line and do npm install save d3 node. There's actually 2 more. I should have included it in that same thing, d3 and also canvas. And we can check what we have added here. Make sure I have the right versions. We've got canvas 2.6, d3, 5.16, and d3 node 2.2.2, which should do what we need. And so let's come back. Those are all installed. Now we can require them, or so we're going to require d3 node. We're going to require d3, the canvas, and then we're going to create the d3 node object with the canvas module. Okay, and so this I all took from here. Okay. Next, we're going to create the canvas. So maybe I should open this up like so. Oops, that's not right. All right, so we've got, sorry, a little tab trouble here. Okay, so we're going to create the canvas. And we want it to be 500 by 300. I chose that aspect ratio because the Mastodon client does that ratio here. So if you click on it, it'll show the whole thing, but I want it to kind of like fit naturally in there. So you don't have to click to expand. It won't trim off the top and the bottom of the image we create. Let's also create the context. Maybe I should have done some lets for these. Let the context equal the canvas dot get context 2D. Let's set our width equal to the canvas width and the height to the canvas height. And let's set the radius to half of the minimum between the two. So that we're guaranteed like it to fit within the image. Okay. Next, we're going to define the colors that we're going to use. As an array is the format that it expects. And this is going to be in the order of active, deaths, recovered. And so I think what might look all right is to do a blue. And these are RGB. So R and G here are zeros. The blue is what is that, like 3/4 of a value? So not totally blue, it's like a softer blue. The deaths we'll do in red, and the recovered we'll do green. All right, from there we're going to copy some of our boilerplate for the arc and the label arcs. The arc, we'll take the outer radius, context, label arc, same thing. And then we'll define our pi. It's d3.pi. The value function is going through the data and taking the value, and so that's these numbers we defined here. So I could set this as a key if I wanted to. This value is literally looking for this object attribute. So let's move on to more boilerplate. We've got the arcs. So that feeds the pi the data. Let's see, where's our data? Okay, that's the data that we're passing in. It's gonna loop through, begin the path, arc it, fill it with the colors, and that should be that. Next, we want to do the boilerplate for some of the styles. So here is the color of the labels, I think. Or no, sorry, maybe the arcs. Maybe the pie slices, I think, will be black. And then the text on top is going to be centered middle in white. And then for each arc, we're gonna center the label, and then here is a condition I added. We'll go ahead and show you what that does later. And so we're gonna fill the text with the name. So this data.name is pulling from the names that we created down here for the labels. And this is the position for them. And then all we have left to do is to render the chart. And that we do with, we do that asynchronously by calling canvas.toDataURL. And I forget exactly where I found that example. You could also write this out to a PNG file, which might help for debugging, but I think this should work. So we'll go ahead and cross our fingers and hope that this will create a data URL, which is like a base 64 encoded the image as a text string, basically. And that's an easy format for us to keep the image in memory and pass it to the Tooting API to Mastodon. Okay, so that should do it for our little test here. Let's go ahead and save this and just give it a shot, see what happens. So we're going to call node index. And we got an error, of course. The path argument, let's see, on line 23. Wait, that's not right. Type object. Okay. Let me see. Resolve canvas to data URL. Render pi. Okay. We need to. This returns a promise, and so this is going to have the right. So instead of having let toot media equal, this needs to dot then toot media. And this happens only after that. So let's try that. There it is. Okay, we even printed out, you can see how the text format of the image looks. Let's go back to Mastodon. It didn't do the image. So something, wait a second, doesn't look like it tooted at all. Did not get the toot. Toot media, toot. Okay, let's scroll up. E-name too long. Oh, okay. So we need to modify this. I think instead of reading this from a file on disk like we were before, we're just gonna straight pass it in to the API, I think is what works. So let's try that again. Because you can see the base 64 encoded image there, it looks like it's okay. We're gonna run node index one more time. Tooted, done. Check over here in Mastodon. And does not appear to be showing up. There it is. All right, so a little delay there in showing up, but now we have a chart. And it looks all right. It's a little funny looking, a little upside down. Maybe I'm used to looking at the USA stats, not the world. But pretty much accomplished what we wanted. We got an image from the data, rendered in the colors we want, styled the text how we wanted it. That condition I commented out, probably don't need from how it's showing up. It's basically a little hack to say if, you know, for one of them, if you, when they were really close together, the text was like almost overlapping, so I kind of pushed one of them out of the way. But in this case, it doesn't look to be a problem. So you see if you click on it, it kind of opens up on its own. There we have it. I think that looks pretty nice, and we can move on to the next step. So to take this a little further, we can now see if we can't schedule this to run every day using GitLab. So there's a few different approaches you might take here. I guess like a cron job would be the traditional methodology you might use to schedule a task to run. That requires having a server that you know is going to be running all the time, where this code can run using npm, and you have to, traditionally cron has some issues making sure that it's going to run consistently. So something that I've found useful recently is GitLab has a schedule pipelines that you can set up to run. So let's go ahead and just create a new schedule here. Let's say every day at 5 p.m. Instead of 5 p.m. let's do let's see, this is in 24-hour clock. Let's change that to 10 a.m. So this is, I think, in cron syntax, it's like minute, hour, day, month, day of the week, something like that. You can learn all about that over here in the cron syntax, but let's see, minute, hour, day of the month, day of the week. Okay, but we just wanted to adjust it slightly. Time zone UTC is fine. And we can add some variables and whatnot later. So call that daily 2. Might have to come back and change the target branch. Yeah, well, we haven't committed any code yet, so should probably do that first. Let's go back. So if you've done any Git before, I've created a project here. We're going to push an existing folder. So I'm going to go back and run these in our command line. Git init, add the remote. Actually, I think I can copy all these at one time, see if it does them all. Add the contents. Oops, actually, don't want to do that. We want to create a git ignore real quick. Git ignore the node modules. Yeah, see how there's a node modules in here. These are all the dependencies, quite a few, even for just a small project. We definitely don't want to commit those. So let's try running git status again. Now we can add everything. Do the git commit and the push. Yep. Let's try that again. There we go. All right. So now we should have our source code up here. And you can see the README that I had put together, the index file we just wrote, and the only thing we need to do now is add a CI/CD. See how this works compared to when I do it on my local machine. It's a little bit different probably. We're going to create a, you can actually do this over here too. We have some templates for building common things. Yeah, maybe I'll use this Docker build. So there's a couple phases we want. So first off, we're gonna use an image with Node, since this is a Node project. Then we're gonna define a couple stages. So let me see, this is YAML, so I think it's 2 spaces there. Yeah, I think. Yeah. So we're gonna have a couple stages. I think it's bigger so you can read it. We're gonna have build, and we're going to have deploy. I think that's okay to have those names. And then for build, what is the difference? Oh, master, okay. I think we want Docker build master, I think. Don't know if we need, yeah, so let's do, okay, so this is fine. So we're going to use their template where they have a phase for, or a stage, task for, what is this, a job? I don't know what you call them, I forget. Basically one for master, one for non-master, that are handled slightly differently. And it's defined with this flag here. And they both happen for the stage build, which is fine. Just comparing with my notes, the script should set up the Docker and then run build. Docker login, push. Let me see what we want to do for build is, I think it's just going to look for, whoops, it's just going to look for a Docker file. So this is good. Let's go ahead over to our source code, and there's one more file we would need to make then, is a Docker file, which is going to define how we build the project into a Docker image. And so to do that, we want to build this from an image node 12 on Ubuntu Buster, I believe this is. And then we're going to create a working dir user source app workdir, sorry, is the Docker command here. Then we're going to copy our contents to the user source app, and then we're going to run npm install dot, and that will install our dependencies. So we can try doing that over here, npm install dot, and you can see that we'll go through our package.json and install these dependencies like we did manually during development, but this will do them all at one time, and then that will compile the node modules folder and the source code into a Docker image, which is a container that we can run to just execute node index. All right, so let's go ahead and commit this file. Git add Docker file, git commit include Docker file, git push, and then back over in GitLab, let's take a look at our CI/CD. So we have our build stage, which we'll try out. Hopefully this will create the Docker file, and then it will push the Docker container, and it will push it into the container registry for this project in GitLab. And so that's great. That'll be like an image ready to go to run this anywhere in the cloud. But then the magic then is to be able to run it from the cloud, which will be our deploy phase. And for the deploy phase, let's see, what we want to do is to, may not need this image up here because I think it is implicit. So let's create create a deploy job. Stage is going to be deploy. The image is going to be a variable from GitLab called image tag, which actually, scratch that. More specifically, see, there's probably some documentation, but you can see these .git, let's see, for master. I think it's going to be this one right here, that same image name, and then the script for what it's going to do in that Docker image is going to be to cd into the user source app, and then let's go ahead and just run node index. And hopefully that'll do what we need. There's a couple other kind of template variables I want to put in here, and environment name, let's call this let's just give that a name real quick. Let's define a variable. Actually, I don't think we need to do that. And then I think that's it. Let's give this a shot, see what happens. We might need to debug it. So I'm going to commit this change using their GUI that committed that change to master. And then with any luck, it's going to kick off a CI/CD pipeline. So we click on CI/CD over here. We click on, we see there's two stages, a build and a deploy that we defined. It's running the build on master because of the master branch. We can click into that and see exactly what commands it's running and the log. So it's going to prepare the task to run. It's using Docker and Docker to run, and then it's going to execute the stages of the Docker file, which basically is just going to do the npm install, save the image, push it into our container. While that's happening, we can look at our schedule. Open that in a new tab, new schedule, call this our daily toot every day at, let's do 8 a.m. UTC is fine. No, actually, let's do our time, Eastern. No variables, we want to pass it. Let's just go ahead and turn that on. So here's the job, and we'll come back to that in a minute. The other thing that we want to do is set some variables to the CI/CD. So as this stands, it does not include the, there's some variables that you can pass to CI/CD. So if you recall back here, we have a couple variables, environment variables. And so you can pass these in through the CI/CD. So let's go ahead and expand that, and you can see I've already created those variables. And you can protect them and have them masked so they don't show up in the logs. So we'll see how well that works. Let's come back to our build. You can see the status. Fetches the Git repository, logs into Docker, does the build, pulls it from our from the node image, and it runs the working directory, copies the project, npm install success. There it is, an installed canvas, etc., etc. And then it pushes it to the image, and it's still pushing. Once this is done, we can look under the package and container registry tab to see the Docker image if it is pushed there successfully. So usually this shouldn't take too long. Job succeeded. Great. So let's come over here to the container registry. And there it is. It's tagged as the latest. It's kind of big, but that should be the only one we need. Let's come back to the CI/CD, and now it's automatically running the deploy. You can set some options to make this like manual, where you have to click a button for that to happen, but let's go ahead and see what happens. So this should automatically do a tweet. This is, or a toot, effectively like us running node index, running the script, except this time it's happening from our compiled Docker container and from the GitLab runner environment in the cloud. So this is running from a GitLab runner, and it's pulling the image container. It ran our commands, which was cd into the app directory, run node index, and then here's the output. Our print statements are included and logged here in the web interface, and it tooted and it's done, and job succeeded. So let's go over to Mastodon. Let's reload the page. And see, there it is. 26 seconds ago, our script ran and tooted. Beautiful. So now the last thing to test is the scheduler. So to do that, we go into the schedules, and it's scheduled to run the next time in 9 hours. One thing I learned about GitLab's scheduling pipelines is these are somewhat new, and they don't have them running up to the minute. So if you're trying to run something like exactly on the 5th minute of the hour, it may not happen. For this, I think it'll work okay. It only needs to run once a day. So you see, this isn't exactly at 8 a.m. like we chose. It's actually at 8:05, and I think they are working on making that happen a little bit more accurately. But anyways, we have the option here to play it, to run it by hand. So let's go ahead and push that button. Successfully schedule the pipeline to run. Go to the pipelines page for details. And so we see our past job here, or pipeline, where we had the build and the deploy. Oh, and we're actually rebuilding this again. We don't want that to happen. So there's one command I forgot to, one thing I forgot to include. Let's go ahead and cancel this real quick. I want to include and exclude for the build. Let's go back into our, let's pull down our changes. So we have a GitLab CI file here in our local host. We actually don't want to do the builds for schedules. So they have a YAML config here that will exclude schedules, so that we don't want to rebuild every time, every day. We just want to deploy every day. So let's go ahead and commit that change. Push the change, and that's actually going to kick off a whole new pipeline to rebuild and deploy. I'm going to cancel that. I don't think we need to rebuild the YAML change. Let's come to the schedules and redeploy manually, and now we have simulated what's going to happen on the schedule is just a deploy. So there it goes, and it should run just like it did before and do one more toot. So I'm gonna cut this off there. It's already probably a little longer than we wanted it to be. I really been itching to kind of demonstrate this, how you can, quickly and easily create a node.js script to do fun automated things, and including deploying to something like GitLab, where you can put it on a schedule, have a kind of microservice mini repo for just that one task, to containerize just that single Node.js script. You could put that script in something like a Lambda or deploy it other places, but this is a pretty fun end-to-end solution for fun little projects like this that are really easy to maintain. So Going forward, maybe I'll do another quick video where we pull maybe local data for the USA, or do something like, say, charting it. Let's see, let's look at my to-do list here I created, where we can have, chart maybe a moving average, like a bar chart or line chart or something, other way to visualize the data. And also we could look at the rate of change, which I think would be also an interesting way to visualize this data. Love to hear you guys' feedback and comments, and look forward to more soon.